My name is Jackie Horbrook, and I am the founder of Black Christian Influencers. I wish I had this amazing story about how I created BCI and thought it through and had this business plan, but I didn't. Honestly, I was creating it while I was working on another project. I was building what was called a counseling cafe. So while I was building that, I actually had a lot of free time waiting for contractors. Like, that was like a big part of my life, just sitting and waiting. And so while I literally was waiting, I thought of this idea because I was at the time just an influencer myself. I didn't think about having a whole network of influencers, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool to bring together some influencers of faith, you know, who could really connect and support each other and build. And I just started putting them together in a Facebook group. And from there, I just listened. I was like, okay, well, what do you guys need? What are your struggles? What are you trying to figure out? And as I started just listening and listening to what they needed, I started to be like, man, this is actually a business.
As Jackie started gathering ideas to start BCI, she still had doubts in her mind about the direction God was taking her after dealing with all the ups and downs of her devastating divorce. But God continued to provide for her and her children. But Jackie was not prepared for God's next move.
So the crazy part is, even after God took me to that place of getting the nice job, I thought I was set, but God was like, nope, there's more to your story, darling. And so I got there. I ended up having to remove myself from that job, and I ended up living with my parents again in their basement with my 2 kids. And I was devastated. Like, honestly, I felt like I just failed at life, like, you know, and so I literally was at this place where I was constantly like battling God. So he told me to build the counseling center. And so I did that, and I was trying to get that off the ground. And then I would be like, well, I need to look for a job. What am I doing, God? And then I would be like, okay, you told me to do this. Let me go back. And so when I had that idea to do the BCI during that time of like complete unrest of being in the basement, living literally side by side with my kids, I cried every night. Like, I kid you not, like having to live in a basement with my 2 kids made me so humble, but I constantly wanted to quit BCI. Like, people would see me posting things and they would see it growing so quickly because the platform just kind of exploded. And so people saw the outward success, but I wasn't seeing the inward results yet. I would be like, man, God, like, I don't know how I'm supposed to make this into a living. You know, right now I'm in my parents' basement. Honestly, God had to break me out of depending on people and depend on him. So it's a constant breaking. So I was literally posting and sharing other people and, you know, doing all of this stuff to support others when I felt like I was just unsupported. And literally every other week, I'm like, I'm done. And then I would come back to it. Something would happen. God would send somebody to bring me back to it, you know? And I remember this one time, it was a conference happening. And I told my sister, I said, after this conference, I'm done with this. I was like, I'm wrapping it up, I'm gonna fold it, and I'm gonna leave. And during that conference, God sent somebody who spoke into my life and said, you're not done. And I'm like, what the heck? You know, but literally that's been my process with God, is that he would literally every time I'm about to walk away, he pulled me back. I feel like for me as a PK, I always have bucked against the idea of being in ministry, because for me, I felt like I wasn't seeing the church as active in communities and spaces as I wanted it to be. So I created this space now where I'm doing just that. I always loved helping people, but I just never saw myself in a pulpit. And for me, if you didn't see yourself in the pulpit, then you just didn't have a place in the church. And, you know, with what we have now on social media, who would have guessed that this would be a pulpit now, right? So I feel like God has really allowed things to progress in his timing. And so ministry now is happening online. It's happening through social media. And, you know, sometimes when we feel like we aren't supposed to be somewhere, God is literally just shifting things to fit what it's going to be. I mean, I feel like a lot of people were like, needing this space. They felt like, man, I've been waiting for a space like this where I can feel like I'm not in a church, but I'm also like not in the world. I'm like in this space where I can just have real life happen and then also incorporate like Christ into it. So a lot of my members have said things like, man, Jackie, you have really like changed my life. You know, you've given me access to people I never would have met before. I mean, I've had people who have now met and are like business partners. They've used each other at their conferences. We've had some engagement. I was like, engagement? That's like, you know, beyond me. When you can connect in a way where people are now like changing their lives.
As the organization continued to rapidly grow, Jackie began to receive disapproval from many people who felt BCI was not inclusive to all Christians.
I believe God prepared me for this because when I started Black Christian Influencers, part of me was like, man, Jackie, you're gonna cut a lot of people off. Like, you know, why wouldn't I just create something that was for everybody, Christian influencers? But what I realized, even with my time as being a director of diversity, was that there are sometimes spaces where people feel more affirmed. And especially if you're looking to create communities, it's important that you establish safety. And so even now, the influencer world is so new, but people have no idea that there are still like racial inequities like in the influencer world. Like influencers have to still deal with a lot of criticism from people who, you know, don't understand their culture or their background and where they're coming from, you know. And so even having to have those dynamics in a space where you already are in a world that feels overwhelming, you know, like it's just hard sometimes. And so I created it and I wanted it to really be a place where people felt supported, and they also felt like they could be safe in themselves. When I created BCI, in my mind, I was like, God, I really want this to be a place where people who are trying to be intentionally diverse can find people of color to be a part of conversations and events and, you know, brand positioning. So now that we're an agency, I'm so excited. One of our first partners is actually Match.com. And so we're working with them to bring influencers of color specifically to their Christian dating app. And so it's just for me like just a moment of realization that it's finally coming around full circle. Don't overthink. Like that is our biggest like detriment sometimes, is that we try to think beyond the moment and plan out every detail when that won't get you anywhere. Honestly, when you over plan, it's no room for God to get in there and work. So I would just literally encourage people to trust God more, because sometimes you're holding on to things and God was like, I can't even get in there because you've already made up your mind on it, right? So you can be at a job and you're like, well, God, you know, use me at this job. And he's like, no, babe, I got like something else I need you to do. Just be open to where God can take you. It's no limit, like literally no limit.